snap. The kick is in the air, and the kick this time is no, sir-ree. No, sir-ree. Final score, Tennessee 20, Florida 17. Pandemonium reigns.
You're listening to the RTI Podcast, powered by RockyTopInsider.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in to another episode of the RTI Podcast. I am Nathaniel Rutherford, your managing editor at RockyTopInsider.com, joined again by Ben McKee, our staff writer at RTI, and he's also the co-host and producer of the Swain Event morning radio show that is on every single morning from 7 till 10 Eastern on the Swain Event app and Swain Event TV on Periscope and Facebook Live. We appreciate all of you tuning in to this episode of the RTI Podcast. We apologize for only having one this week. It is kind of a little, I guess, not off season yet, but we're going to do some stuff early this week. This week's just been a crazy one for both Ben and I. Our schedules have been a little off. Ben's been trying to move and stuff, apartments and everything. So we've got all kinds of stuff happening. We wanted to get one for you guys this week at least, though. So we do have one RTI podcast. We'll try to do a couple next week, too, because we'll have both bowl game talk and Tennessee basketball talk with the big Memphis game coming up next week. So we'll have plenty of stuff for you guys next week, too. Should have, after we get done doing this with Ben, should have an RTI and VR2 recruiting podcast coming up a little bit later on today as well. Both these podcasts should be coming out on Friday afternoon, early Friday evening. But Ben, on the football front, the season's over. We haven't had a chance to really sit here and talk about that on a podcast, just you and I. But Tennessee finishes off this season 7-5. They win 5 straight games. It wasn't the prettiest game against Vanderbilt, but really bad weather. Tennessee had a historic performance from Eric Gray. Improved to 7-5, 5-3 in SEC play. It's the first time since 2015 Tennessee's had a winning record in SEC play. First time since 2015 that Tennessee has won out in the month of November. All in all, considering how things went in the beginning of the season, I think it was a very good finish to the year. I want to have a conversation about that here in just a second, about speaking of how things went to the beginning of the season to how they ended. I want to talk about that here in just a second. But one of the biggest news that came out of this weekend, I guess it happened on Wednesday of this week, was but it came from Tennessee's game on Saturday, was the fact that Jauan Jennings is now going to be suspended for the first half of play in whatever bowl game Tennessee plays in. We don't know that yet. We'll find that out on Sunday. Sometime Sunday afternoon, and we'll figure out kind of all the bowl matchups and everything like that because of all the conference championship games this weekend. But Jauan Jennings will be suspended the first half of whatever bowl game Tennessee is in because of his actions from the Vanderbilt game, where in the fourth quarter he was on the sideline after he tackled Vanderbilt's punt returner, and he did a little extra there, and he was doing some extracurricular activities and kind of, I don't know what was being done and said down there when they're both on the ground. Can't tell, obviously. There's no audio pickup from that. But somehow, I saw Jennings, I think, did it. But the Vanderbilt player's helmet comes off. Jennings is stepping away. Looks like he stepped on the guy's face. To me, you can't judge intent from the video, but we'll get from there in a second. But he did end up, his cleat hit the Vanderbilt player's face. No flag in the game at that time, but that's obviously, that happens all the time where there's not flags being thrown for extracurriculars or whatever. But after the game, a few days after the game, SEC announces that they're going to suspend Jennings for the first half. Philip Fulmer releases a statement and says that Greg Sankey and him talked on the phone for a long time, and that Jauan Jennings has been a good player, a good representative all season. Didn't seem like they necessarily agreed with the decision, but they weren't going to fight it. And they said that they said as much. They're not going to fight the decision that Jennings will just have to sit the first half of the bowl game. Ben, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think it is fair? Do you think it's foul? Because I think it's weird to me, and I said as much on Twitter, that I don't know necessarily that you can judge intent from the video. I also, but at the same time though, I'm not like shocked or mad that Jennings got suspended, because I can understand it, because it doesn't look good on video. I mean, whatever happens there, even if it's an accident, it doesn't look good. But at the same time, if you're the SEC and they don't come out and say 100% that they believe Jennings did it on purpose. Their statement was pretty non-committal on that front. They said that they're just suspending him for actions that happened on Saturday, because I believe it was a flagrant, a deliberate flagrant kind of, not deliberate, but a flagrant foul, essentially what they're saying. But they didn't say that they thought he did it on purpose. They didn't say that he stomped on the kid's face. So I don't know that you can judge intent. And if you think he did it on purpose, why only suspend him for a half? Why not suspend him for the full game? But then if you don't think he did it on purpose, then why suspend him at all? I just think it's to me, I think the actions watching it on film, I can understand feel like there needs to be a punishment for that. But at the same time, the SEC has been very inconsistent with this. Where was this when Cash Daniel, did what he did earlier this season, where he was twisting? You could very clearly see him twisting the ankle of the Florida quarterback. I don't remember which Florida quarterback it was at the time, if it was Trask or Franks, but very deliberately twisting the ankle of the Florida quarterback. I don't recall the SEC suspending him. I think they let Kentucky kids kind of do their own internal investigation of it. And I don't think the SEC stepped in there. So to me, it just seems very inconsistent with the SEC, what they've done. And I don't know if it sets a precedent or not. I don't think that. I just want some consistency. It's my thing. I don't necessarily agree with suspending Jennings. It doesn't shock me, but I just want some consistency from the SEC. Where was this, 2 months ago? Where's this been in other situations? Excuse me, in SEC play over the last year, 2, 3 or so.
Yeah, you and I are on the exact same page on this one. To be quite honest, I do think that Jauan Jennings had bad intentions on the sideline. As Swain has talked about all week, and I've made the same points, is I didn't have anything wrong, or I didn't have a problem with the hit. Maybe it was a hair too late, but, there is a freeze frame, a still shot of the Vanderbilt punt returner with his foot still in bounds when Jauan was hitting him on the shoulder pads. So he was going out of bounds, so it was an unnecessary hit. But to be quite honest, it's Jauan Jennings. It's his final game. We all know he hates Vanderbilt. I did not think that was over the top. I didn't. I liked it. I want my players doing that, to be quite honest. Essentially, I want my players walking up to the line and not passing the line, not crossing the line. And then from that point on, Jauan did cross the line. If we take our orange-colored sunglasses off, everything after that play was uncalled for. It was extra. He did not need to be over there. And as a result, he hurt his team because he put himself in a position to be suspended. So whether there was bad intent, whether there was good intentions on the sideline, whether he meant to step on the Vanderbilt player's face or whether he didn't mean to, he still put himself in a position by being extra on the sideline, laying on top of him. He was talking trash.
Oh, yeah.
We all saw his body language. We know how Jauan was feeling in that moment. And personally, like I said, I will admit, I do think that Jauan had bad intentions, and I'm basing that off of his history. Just kind of, we all know Jauan's personality. He's maybe quickly angered, and we know this. This isn't breaking news. He likes to live on the edge a little bit in regards to football. So I do think he had bad intentions on the sideline, if I'm being honest, but I do not like the suspension because you can't prove that. That is my opinion, that he was acting out on the sideline in terms of stepping on the face, because even in the video, you can't tell 100% that Jauan purposefully stepped on the Vanderbilt player's face.
Right,
So
and like you said, he could have bad intentions, and at the same time, you can think he had bad intentions and not think he meant to, step on the guy's face.
Exactly. Exactly. Jauan, if you could prove that he absolutely meant to step on his face, then suspend him for the entire bowl game. He deserves that, because you can see him pulling an Albert Haynesworth. If Jauan wasn't a senior and the bowl game wasn't his last game, and you could tell that he was doing it on purpose, I would say suspend him for the bowl game and then the first 4 games of next season. That is uncalled for. There's no place for that in football. But you can't 100% see Jauan purposefully stepping on that Vanderbilt player's face. And so my question has been, what if, the video doesn't look good, but A, you can't tell that he's doing it on purpose, and B, what if he truly did not mean to step on that Vanderbilt player's face? Then this half-game suspension is all for nothing. So that's kind of where my thought process is on it. Jauan was out of line, being extra there after the tackle, and it ended up costing his team because he put himself in a position to be suspended. But I did not like the suspension because you can't, without a doubt, prove that he had bad intentions and that he did that on purpose. And unfortunately for Jauan, he does not get the benefit of the doubt. I kind of tweeted this out on Twitter. I wonder what would have happened had it been Josh Palmer or Marquez Callaway, because I don't think those guys get suspended. And I'm using those two because they play the same position as Jauan. I mean, we could really throw out anybody on the team, and they would probably get the benefit of the doubt because they don't have a track record of unsportsmanlike penalties, and like getting kicked off the team, having to work himself back to the team. So I do wonder what the outcome would have been had it been somebody other than Jauan. And I say that because I don't think Jauan gets the benefit of the doubt, unfortunately. And I understand that he doesn't. So I did not like the suspension simply because you cannot prove 100% that he did it intentionally. But again, Jauan also has to recognize fault in this, in the sense that he put himself in that position by acting extra on the sideline. And then the other narrative, and you talked about it, is the whole consistency thing with the SEC. And I'm in agreement on that. And everybody else with a brain is in agreement on that. You don't even have to be a fan of football to be in agreement on that. If what Jauan did deserves a half-game suspension when you could not 100% tell that he was doing that on purpose, then Alabama's Raekwon Davis absolutely should have been suspended because you could 100% see that he had bad intentions when he was going Floyd Money Mayweather on the Missouri player laying on the ground trying to beat him up. I mean, he threw 3 or 4 punches, and they were legitimate punches. You saw what he was purposely doing, to whereas you could not see that with Jauan Jennings. And then you look up north in Lexington, and Cash Daniel trying to break the ankle of a Florida player. I believe it was the quarterback, either Kyle Trask or Felipe Franks. I can't remember which one, but you could 100% tell that Cash Daniel was trying to snap the ankle of the Florida player, and nothing is done about it. I just don't understand the inconsistency there, and I think the SEC took a big L on this one from my perspective.
Yeah, the Raekwon Davis thing to me is mind blowing, because I remember that situation was last year where they essentially, like I said with Cash Daniel, that they just let Alabama kind of handle it internally. Saban said he's going to be punished, and I don't remember what the punishment was. It wasn't anything, that was a much more severe case where you could definitely, there was intent there. There was no question about intent with Raekwon Davis. He was punching the guy, like you said, going full boxing mode on him. Evander Holyfield, Mike Tyson just wailing on the guy. I mean, there was no question about intent on that one. You'd have to say, well, that could have been an accident. Nah, that was intentional. Just with same thing with Cash Daniel. I don't know how you could look at the video of Cash Daniel and say that wasn't intentional, what he was doing, twisting the ankle of the Florida quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see who Tennessee gets matched up with in the bowl game and how much Jennings missing the first half could affect things, because he's obviously Tennessee's, he's Garantano's security blanket more or less, and he's the guy that's the go-to target in the passing game. I think Tennessee will be okay because they have other receivers who can make big plays, like Marquez Callaway and Josh Palmer, and Dominic Wood-Anderson's been used quite a bit more here in the last 3-4 weeks or so, and he's got more catches and targets and everything too. But he will get him back, like he's going to be out for the whole game. But it could very much kind of change the dynamic of that first half, change the dynamic of what Jim Chaney wants and can do on offense in that first half of whoever Tennessee's playing, whether it's a Big Ten team, an ACC team, or whatever. But we'll get to that here in just a second too. There was something, Ben, that I thought of here in my intro spiel that I didn't mention to you in our production talk here before we started the podcast, but I wanted to get to, and I think is an interesting topic of conversation. And that is the fact that, as I was saying in the beginning there, Tennessee began this season 1-3, 1-4, and they've finished very strong to go 7-5. They've won 5 straight. They've won 6 of their last 7 to end the season, with the only loss coming to Alabama. And I think a lot of people now obviously feel a lot more optimistic with the 7-5 and looking to the future. Tennessee loses a not a big group of seniors, but they lose, in my opinion, a pretty vital group of seniors now that the season's gone on the way that it has. Guys like Nigel Warrior, Daniel Batuli, Darrell Taylor, Jauan Jennings, Marcos Callaway, those are all big time productive players for Tennessee this season, and getting someone to step up behind them is not going to be super easy next season. We're probably losing Trey Smith as well. I would imagine he's probably going to declare for the NFL. But I saw this. I talked about this briefly in the post-game show on our YouTube channel after the Vanderbilt game. I think someone mentioned it there too, and I brought it up a little bit then and talked about it, but I wanted to save it and have a discussion with you about it more. That's the fact that, is it fair to look at Tennessee's season and say, well, they should be or could be 9-3 or 8-4 right now with the way the season began? Because I don't know that you can definitively say that if Tennessee wins the first 2 games of the season, if they beat Georgia State and BYU, or if they just beat Georgia State and they still lose to BYU, I don't know that you can definitively say if Tennessee goes 2-0 or 1-1 at the beginning of the season. Does Tennessee finish the season the way they do? Do they have that? I don't know. I think maybe they needed to have that kind of the bottom falling out and there not being a safety net there. I think they needed to kind of have that moment where they all came together and got galvanized and were able to put the stretch run together. Because that's not to say that anything can happen in a season. I just personally, with the way this team is constructed, if they come out and played sloppy and still somehow managed to pull out like a 35-30 victory over Georgia State and barely beat BYU, I don't know that would have better prepared them for the kind of ugly games they had to come out here and play against Mississippi State, for example, or Kentucky, or even against South Carolina, where that wasn't ugly, but I guess kind of first half was a little bit, and you were trailing at halftime. But I just don't know that you can 100% factually. Well, you can't, because we don't know. But I just don't know that. To me, it's a fair thing to say this team should be 9-3, and then people getting mad about what could have been, what should have been. Because I don't know that if Tennessee wins the first couple of games of the season, that they end up getting to the point now where they finish the season strong. Maybe they do. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this team goes 2-0 at the beginning of the season, and then the only 3 losses that Tennessee has all year are to Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. Maybe I'm wrong. I just think personally, the team we saw at the beginning of this year, and I know you've said this before too, Ben, the team we saw at the beginning of this year, the way they were playing, the way they were not lining up correctly, the way they were as just a team makeup and a team chemistry, I think they needed those losses. I think they needed to get experience. They missed Daniel Batuli, for example, for the first couple games. His return made a big impact on the defense, and I think they needed some guys to leave. I don't think all the guys that left this year and during the season, I don't think all of them were cancers or anything like that. I don't think they were all super bad influences. I don't think they were all bringing the team down. But I think it very much was a fact of those guys left. Everyone else in the locker room was kind of looked around and said, hey, I'm buying in. Are you buying in? They weren't buying in. Yeah, are you buying in? And I think it was kind of a big come to Jesus moment for this team this year. I just don't know that if the beginning of the season doesn't happen the way it does, that the end of the season happens. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Tennessee, if they win those 2 games, they can still go 9-3. I don't think it's a very fair kind of outlook to have. I get it to an extent, because Tennessee on paper should definitely have beaten Georgia State and BYU, even with all those issues they had with them not being able to line up and no Daniel Batuli and no Bryce Thompson. Tennessee should have been able to, and no Emmett Gooden earlier on, still adjusting to that too. They still should have been able to beat Georgia State and BYU. But at the same time, though, Georgia State ended up being a pretty good team. They've put together a really good season. They have a top 30 offense. BYU had a not a bad season. So not like they lost to a couple of scrubs, but there's still teams that I think Tennessee should have beaten. I just think I don't know that Tennessee finishes winning 6 of 7 and 5 straight without first having just the way this season began this year for them. So I don't know that. To me, I don't agree with the whole Tennessee should be 9-3, 8-4 type of thing. I think 7-5. That's our prediction to begin the season, and I think it's about what they are. I think they're about a 7-5 football team.
Yeah, well, they should be 9-3 because they should have beat Georgia State and BYU in the first place. Just kind of, just in general. I agree with your point. I do agree that without losing those games, I don't think that Tennessee, is able to battle back. Sorry, my dog is losing him. Judge, hush. But I don't think Tennessee is able to battle back and, beat Missouri when Tennessee is kind of struggling early on. I definitely don't think Tennessee is able to battle back against Kentucky. Kentucky was up 14-3 at the end of the first quarter, and the offense could maybe even been halftime. Sorry, so many games have happened since then.
You're good.
They all run together at this point. But Tennessee was trailing at halftime. Jeremy Pruitt makes the change at quarterback, and if Tennessee doesn't go through the trials and tribulations of the BYU game, of the Georgia State game, then I don't think Tennessee is able to come back and beat Kentucky, just because they haven't been in that fight. They haven't had to grind through one another. And like you were saying about, kind of gut checking each other and saying, hey, are you bought in? I'm bought in. Like, just checking each other at the front door. And Tennessee had a couple of guys transfer there after the Florida game. I thought that it was addition by subtraction. You got maybe some cancers off the team that weren't influencing the locker room in a negative way, because all it takes is one guy, one bad apple to spoil the rest of the bunch. And I think there was some of that going on. So I absolutely agree with you. Tennessee should be 9-3 because you should not lose to Georgia State ever, and you should not lose to BYU the way that you did. Alontae Taylor and his gaff. Nigel Warrior missed that tackle in midfield. Jarrett Garantano left a lot of points on the field. So technically they should be 9-3 just because Tennessee should never lose to those type of teams. But I do agree with you, without going through what they went through against Georgia State and BYU and having to check one another, and then obviously the 1-4 start, the loss to Florida and whatnot. I don't think Tennessee is able to overcome Brian Maurer's concussion against Mississippi State and win that game. And I mentioned the Missouri game, the Kentucky game. So I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. I don't think you're crazy for thinking that, because Tennessee had to go through those adversities at the beginning of the season to learn and get better, and it helped them in the long run, as crazy as it sounds.
Yeah, and I think that's, I don't fault, like you said, I don't really fault people for having that opinion of, of feeling that way of, maybe Tennessee should be 9-3, maybe we shouldn't be, maybe not content, but just as happy as people are. I'm under the opinion that Tennessee's had such a struggle in football over the last decade that, man, let people be happy. I know that it's easy to look back in the season and say what could have been, what should have been, maybe even, but man, the way this season ended, I know the competition level kind of dropped off too a little bit for Tennessee. It wasn't as tough down the stretch as it was in the first month and a half or so. But man, it's been such a struggle to find positive news and positivity from Tennessee football over the last 12 years or so that I'm willing to be a little more lenient on this one. Call me a sunshine pumper if you want to, if that's what that's how you feel. But I'm just kind of overall the massive negativity from people on different stuff. Just let people enjoy this, man. It's been a while since Tennessee's had. It's been since 2016 that Tennessee's had a winning season, just period. So it's been since 2016 Tennessee's gotten to a bowl game, and that 2016 season wasn't fun after the first 5 games. Or I guess that Texas A&M game was fun, but after that first 6 games, it wasn't fun either. So it's just been a while since Tennessee fans have been able to have just kind of consistently, some fun and some entertainment, and actually enjoying a football season, enjoying watching games, and enjoying seeing the outcomes of games. So I'm going to be a little more lenient on this one than I think maybe some people probably will be, but I'm under the impression of let people enjoy it, man. Let people enjoy this 5-game winning streak, what could be a 6-game winning streak depending on who you play in a bowl game, and carrying that momentum into the next season and seeing how many more you can rattle off next year. Obviously, it's a little bit tougher of a schedule next year with Oklahoma on the slate as your non-conference opponent than BYU, but hey, be an interesting challenge to see what happens there. Speaking of the bowl game, Ben, we're going to find out this Sunday where Tennessee is going to play, who they're going to play, kind of how is it going to shake out with the final college football playoff poll of the regular season. Or I guess technically it's still regular season. I guess conference championship time is still regular season time. But with Alabama kind of falling to 12, with Auburn being 11, with just the way the SEC has a lot of those teams kind of up there at the kind of near the same area as far as in the rankings and stuff, with this, aside from LSU, who's clearly to me the cream of the crop in the SEC, and I would be pretty surprised if they don't win the SEC championship game unless Georgia's defense is just plays lights out or something. But the way everything's looking out, Alabama could potentially play spoiler for Tennessee to get into, maybe a little bit better of a bowl than what the Gator Bowl is. Not the Gator Bowl is bad or anything like that. The Gator Bowl is it's a pretty good bowl. But for Tennessee to move up to, say, an Outback Bowl or something like that, Alabama could potentially be playing spoiler because they're outside of that New Year's Six range, which is just something that I expected to see here, a month ago or so. But before we get into where we ultimately think Tennessee will end up and who we think they will end up playing, there's been a lot of projections out there putting Tennessee with a bunch of Big Ten teams because that's where SEC and Big Ten have a lot of crossover for bowl games and stuff. There's been a couple for ACC. That's typically, I think the Belk Bowl has been one of those I've seen like that. But Ben, if you had your choice of the likely bowls, and if you had your choice, Tennessee would be playing for the national championship game. But if you had your choice of the actual bowls Tennessee could be in right now in this postseason, and their opponent, who would you want to see Tennessee play, and what bowl would you want to see Tennessee play in?
I would want to see Tennessee play Ohio State in the college football playoffs.
Okay, so then of the ones that Tennessee is actually capable of getting, if at 7-5 right now, what would you want to see?
Then the Sugar Bowl. No, I'm kidding. Of all the realistic options, I would say, selfishly, I would want the Music City Bowl just because it's 2.5 hours down the road west of Knoxville. That'd be easy to commute to. But I know everybody's enamored with the Florida Bowls and whatnot. Obviously, if I could pick, it would be the Outback Bowl. And that will be determined on whether or not Georgia makes the college football playoff. If the SEC gets two teams in the playoff, then that means Alabama probably goes to the Sugar Bowl. Auburn probably goes to the Cotton Bowl. Texas A&M, there's rumors about an A&M Texas bowl game in the Texas Bowl, which is why you don't hear A&M really floating around with the Music City Bowl or any of the Florida Bowls. It is possible, but you hear them more associated with the Texas Bowl. That's kind of like the Texas Bowl is what Tennessee is to the Music City Bowl. Like the Texas Bowl wants A&M because obviously it's in Texas. A&M will travel well to that, which is the same case for Tennessee and the Music City Bowl. So obviously, if I had my pick, it would be the Citrus Bowl down in Orlando because that's the best bowl in the state of Florida outside of the Orange Bowl, which Tennessee does not have a realistic option. So if you are a Tennessee fan, which we are, then I am hoping. Well, see, it's weird because we don't want Georgia to make the playoff, but on the flip side, there is a positive in the sense of Tennessee probably moves up a slot in the bowl rankings. In terms of, capable bowls it could make if Georgia makes the playoff, because like I mentioned, Alabama probably slides to the Sugar Bowl if Georgia's not in it. Auburn slides to the Cotton Bowl, there's been a lot of Memphis, Alabama talk in that one. So everybody slides up a bowl in terms of if you were to rank the importance of SEC bowl tie-in. So it would be the Citrus Bowl for me because I think it's the best bowl in Florida. If not that, then the Outback Bowl.
Yeah, I'm looking at the all the tie-ins and things like that right now. I may actually do an article on this to kind of help explain things for Vol fans too. But right now you have obviously the playoff, which, like we just said, if Georgia wins, they're in, and LSU, depending on the score of that game, they would still probably be in. I would imagine. If I were to member of the committee, I don't know how you could keep LSU out, even if they lose to Georgia in the championship game. I don't know how you could keep them out. So anyway, you've got the playoff, and then you've got the next game, which is the next bowl game, which is the Sugar Bowl, which is the next highest SEC or the highest ranked SEC team that's not in the playoff. Then you have the Citrus Bowl, which is the third. So you have, if like you said, it might be Tennessee's best interest if Georgia does make it into the playoff. I don't see it happening. So to me, you're gonna have one team in the playoff. You'll have one team in the Sugar Bowl. You have one team in the Citrus. And then the SEC will assign a team to any of these next bowls in this pool, which is the Liberty Bowl, the Belk Bowl, the Music City Bowl, Outback Bowl, Tax Slayer Bowl, and the Texas Bowl. And then you have the second kind of bottom tier, and that is the Birmingham and Independence Bowl. So, like you said, it just kind of depends on, and there's not technically a tier list for that big pool right there. But you can kind of say, to me, typically the teams that you see in the Outback and the Gator, Taxslayer Bowl are usually, a little more high profile than what you'd see in the Liberty Bowl or in the I guess the Texas Bowl, just depending on what's happening there. But, Music City Bowls, I think, has kind of moved up some, and it's the way people view it. It used to be kind of a lower tier bowl, but it's been around long enough now to where you get some of the more higher profile SEC teams into the Music City Bowl. And I think Belk Bowl is actually a decently highly thought of one now too. But if I had my pick before we talk about where we think Tennessee does end up, where I talk about where I think they end up, my pick would be, if it's going to be a Big Ten team, I just get tired of the Big Ten matchups, because we saw that 3 straight years under Butch Jones, and 3 straight years there were pretty easy victories for Tennessee. And I just don't think Big Ten plays a particularly entertaining brand of football for the most part, unless you're Ohio State. Minnesota's an intriguing matchup this year, but if I want to watch Tennessee play a Big Ten team, I would absolutely love to see Tennessee play Michigan. That would be my number one bowl matchup, which I don't think is going to happen. But my number one bowl matchup will be Tennessee versus Michigan, in an Outback Bowl or something like that. I think Michigan could end up going. I actually don't know where Michigan will end up. That's going to be an interesting kind of thing. The Big Ten and the SEC have some of the more intriguing kind of bowl scenarios to play out here this weekend. But if it's going to be a Big Ten team, I would love to see Tennessee play Michigan. That would just be a lot of fun for me, and a lot of fun, I think, for a lot of Vol fans too. And it'd give Tennessee a good test. And I would like to see Tennessee get kind of tested here in a bowl game. If it's going to be any other school, looking at kind of the matchups, I don't think Tennessee's going to go to the Texas Bowl, but a Tennessee-Texas matchup would be a lot of fun in a bowl game. That's kind of my number 2. That one's, I know, a lot less likely to happen. I think Tennessee-Michigan's already not very likely to happen, but I would love to see Tennessee-Texas. That would be fun. The battle of the UTs, who's the real UT? That whole thing would be a lot of fun. And plus, just with the Tennessee and Texas are 2 premier names in college football, and Texas was supposed to be back this year, and Tennessee and Texas finished with the same record of 7-5. So that would be interesting. The Music City Bowl, which is either ACC or Big Ten. If it's going to be an ACC school, I think, to me, Louisville's an interesting one, just because the head coach over there, I think that they've got that program kind of turning around and looking a lot better than it was just last year, a year or two, a couple years ago as well. That'd be intriguing to me. I don't know who else in the ACC I would care a whole lot about seeing Tennessee play, unless it's Clemson, but that's obviously not going to happen because Clemson is going to go to the playoff. But those are the kind of ones I'd want to see. Tennessee, Michigan. I'd be fine with Tennessee, Minnesota, and that's looking like a fairly probable matchup, just because Minnesota is one that Tennessee hasn't played in a long time. Minnesota's interesting because of PJ Fleck. They were 9-0 heading into the last 3 weeks of the season, and then they lost 2 of the last 3 games to go 10-2. I think that'd be a good test for Tennessee. A 10-2 Minnesota team that you got to wonder what I wouldn't say that you wonder too much about their motivation, because Minnesota isn't like this big time program that is used to playing in a bunch of bigger bowls and things like that, and the Outback's or Gator, either one, is such a big drop off for them. I don't think you had to worry a whole lot about that. But at the same time, they were ranked. They've been ranked for most of the season. They've been a top 15-ish team. I think maybe top 10 at 1.2 for this season. So I think that one's one that is very highly probable to happen. I'd be okay with it. I'm with you though, Ben, for the sake of traveling, and where we'll be for my family and I will be for the holidays and stuff this year. I would be okay with Tennessee going to the Music City Bowl, because it would mean that a much higher likelihood of both of us being able to go cover it and go see it. As it is, it'll probably as long as everything works out with RTI and everything, it might just be you going to go see the bowl game, or depending on where it goes. But if it's a Music City Bowl, I would like to go see that and cover that. That's the last bowl game. Obviously, Tennessee was in. That's the last bowl game I got to go cover with Tennessee when they played Nebraska in the 2016 Music City Bowl. So we'll see where that ends up happening. And I'm just tired of Tennessee playing these uninspiring, boring Big Ten teams that are supposed to be really good and then not being really good. Because look at Northwestern back in 2015, where Tennessee was 8-4, and not bad. And I think they started the season kind of ranked and knocked out of it. And I think Northwestern was like number 12 or 15 or something like that. They were a top 20, pretty sure almost top 15 team that year. when Tennessee played them in the Outback Bowl, and then Tennessee they just whooped them. I mean, you had Evan Berry pick 6 at the very end there, which that was a fun return to watch, but that game was just out of hand, and that happened. That was just a big exclamation point on the ending. Tennessee handled Iowa, and that was a little bit closer of that was supposed to be a little closer of a contested game, because I think Tennessee was 6-6, Iowa was 7-5, so it wasn't like Iowa was this big powerhouse that year, or thought of to be a really good team. And then Tennessee beat the brakes off them. Tennessee handled Nebraska. The score was closer in the final score and everything like that, but that wasn't until Nebraska kind of scored late and kind of sort of started to make it a little bit of a game in that second half. But then Tennessee, I mean, they were in control of that game. That was never really, being there and watching it, that was never really in doubt either. So, Ben, I'm tired of Big Ten. I want to see Tennessee play another school that is not a Big Ten team. But looking over the projected bowl list here, like 3 of them are SEC versus a Big Ten school, and I want to see more. I want to see more stuff. There is not a single one of these bowl affiliations that is outside of a New Year's Six bowl type of thing, where you have an SEC and a Pac-12 team. I want to see that. I want to see one bowl game, kind of Midwestern area of the United States, matches up an SEC school and a Pac-12 school. You have a few like the Sugar Bowls at SEC and Big 12, Liberty Bowl and Texas Bowl are SEC and Big 12. You have a couple ACC ones as well, the Belk Bowl, and then the Gator and Music City Bowl can both be ACC. The Independence Bowl is ACC. Birmingham Bowl is American Athletic. Why can't we do something else with the Birmingham Bowl, or move that bowl to somewhere else and have it to be an SEC Pac-12? I want bowl games that are not the New Year's Six and not the playoff ones. Make them fun, man. Make them fun matchups you don't get to see every day. Make them a time where you can see, a Tennessee play a USC, or a Tennessee play in Oregon, or just something where that's a potential matchup that you could have at an SEC school versus a Pac-12 school. That those two conferences just very rarely, unless it's in the in the playoff, they very, very rarely ever play each other. So that's my kind of little bowl spiel before we end the podcast here.
No, I'm with you. If it were up to me, I would be on the phone with every major bowl person that is in charge of scheduling a bowl, and I would schedule a special bowl with Rutgers so we can open up a can of whoop ass on Greg Schiano. But since that's not possible, I would love to see Memphis in a bowl game.
Yeah.
Memphis has a very good football team, so it may not end up very well for Tennessee. But I would love to see Memphis in a bowl game, because Memphis is really feeling itself on the football field right now.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Norvell is about to leave for what appears to be Florida State. I bet you $10 that news is broken during their conference championship game tomorrow, and if not during the game, then shortly after. I would – point being, Mike Norvell will not be Memphis' head coach come Monday, so we would get a different Memphis team probably, but I would love to put Memphis back in its place, because they are feeling themselves too much right now. Yes, they have had more success than Tennessee the last couple of seasons, but let's also remember what conference they play in. And I'm not saying that because the SEC is all high and mighty. It is by far the best conference in the country. But my point is, I'm not trying to say that the AAC doesn't have good football, because it does. Memphis, Cincinnati, Navy, USF, UCF. USF just fired Charlie Strong. They have been bad, but they do have good football teams. But I promise you, Memphis would not be having the success that it is having if it were in the SEC. And I can assure you that Tennessee would not be as bad as it has been over the last couple of years if Tennessee had the scheduling of the AAC. So I would love to put Memphis back in its place. Don't know for sure that it would happen and Tennessee would win that game, but at least to have the opportunity to put them back in their place, I would love. Another team I would love to play, Georgia State. Can we please schedule Georgia State in the bowl game? I don't care if we have to play them in the North Pole and you've got Santa's little elves sprinkled around the football field making toys. Can we just play Georgia State again so we can put them back in their place too? And then, if you remember correctly, there was a gentleman who the Monday or the week after Georgia State beat Tennessee decided to rent a truck of sorts and buy a big enough screen to tote around downtown Atlanta playing the Georgia State-Tennessee game. Can we please schedule Georgia State so Tennessee can beat Georgia State down so I can return the favor and head down to Atlanta and project Tennessee's win over Georgia State and torture them? And then on top of that, having the Jauan Jennings Hail Mary on loop for Georgia fans as well. Can we please do that? So in another universe, I know all of those are not real possibilities, but in an alternate universe, those are the teams that I would love to see Tennessee playing. The realistic games, I would love to see Tennessee play Michigan, just because of the Jim Harbaugh storyline and Big Ten, SEC. I do want to see Tennessee play a Big Ten team because I do think the Big Ten is the second best conference in all of football. So give me a good team out of the Big Ten, like a Michigan. I think that would be a fun matchup. Let Aubrey Solomon get some revenge on Michigan. Yep. And that's a game that I think Tennessee could win with. As inconsistent as that offense is, you can absolutely win that football game. So I would love to see that. I'd love to see the Texas game, as you mentioned. Trying to think of other teams that Tennessee has been projected to play. Indiana doesn't really, move the needle for me.
Nah.
And those are the type of Big Ten teams I don't want to play. If it were a Penn State, which Penn State will obviously be in a much bigger bowl game, but Penn State, Ohio State, those top tier, I would love to see a game with Minnesota. I would. I think that would be a great test. They have NFL receivers. That'd be fun to watch Bryce Thompson and Alontae Taylor and Nigel Warrior and those guys go up against each other. And then P.J. Fleck is obviously a polarizing figure, not Jim Harbaugh level, but people are well aware of P.J. Fleck, so I think that would be a cool storyline. So there's not just one particular matchup in my real world of bowl projections that I just absolutely have to see. But I don't know. I want Tennessee to play good competition. And Wes Rucker wrote this column early in the week saying that it's time for Tennessee to play somebody good in the bowl game, because we really need to just see how far they have improved, how much they have improved. Because I don't necessarily buy into the theory, but it is true if you go down Tennessee's wins down the second half of the schedule, they didn't really beat anybody. They really didn't. Vanderbilt's beat up. Missouri's beat up. Vanderbilt's bad. Kentucky has a wide receiver at quarterback. South Carolina, they turned out to be a crap team. Mississippi State didn't really live up to expectations. Tennessee really didn't beat anybody. Right now, Tennessee's best win is over Kentucky, in my opinion, on the road, having to come back. And I think Kentucky is very talented. With Terry Wilson, that's probably an 8-9 win football team, as crazy as it sounds for Kentucky to do that a second straight year. So my overall thought on who Tennessee plays in the bowl is that I hope it is a Michigan type, a Minnesota type, one of these teams that has had a really good season from start to finish this year. That way that we can truly judge how far Tennessee has come. And also, like, if Tennessee, plays a good team like Michigan and gets blown out, then I think that could serve some good for the program. It can humble them going into the offseason, doesn't let them get too big of a head and get complacent heading into off-season workouts. So even if it's a blowout, then I think it would be a good experience, a good learning lesson for Tennessee.
That's an interesting way of looking at it too. I'm with you. You're talking about Tennessee not, quote unquote, beating anybody down the stretch, and the best victory probably being against Kentucky. At the same time, though, that kind of feeds into the conversation we're having earlier about viewing this season as maybe disappointing because Tennessee could have been 8-4, 9-3. Same time, Tennessee was viewed a couple months ago as a nobody. I mean, they were looked at as a nobody, and perception isn't always reality. I think Tennessee obviously has more talent than the teams that they end up beating, the Kentuckys, the Missouris, the South Carolinas, and the record for the most part will say what you are. I think South Carolina is a more talented team than 4-8. I think they're better than what their record maybe indicated. But that, like I said, the old adage is your record is what it says you are. But I think it's college football is interesting, just from the whole like I said, the whole perception perspective, because Tennessee was viewed after that Florida game, especially, even after the Georgia game, even though I think Tennessee did look better in that game, Tennessee was viewed as a nobody. I mean, they were not favored to win. The only games Tennessee was favored to win after that Georgia game were against UAB and Vanderbilt. And even then, it wasn't like Tennessee was massively odds-on favorites for both those games, at least not for UAB at that point. And then that changed as Tennessee kind of got things rolling a little bit more. But still, it's not like Tennessee was, supposed to win all these games. And I think that does show resolve, and it does show, to me, another reason why I don't think it's necessarily fair to view this season in a negative light of Tennessee should be 8-4, 9-3. Tennessee was viewed as a nobody after that point, and they could have easily given up on the season. They could have easily just said, hey, we're going to mail it in for next year. Or the seniors could have said, well, it is what it is. I'm just going to kind of keep myself safe and protected and, not do anything I wouldn't say not do anything, but, just kind of do whatever. But they didn't do that. So that just kind of to put a little bow tie back on that and put a little, I guess, go back to a previous conversation we had there. But I think that'll go ahead and do it here for this episode of the RTI podcast. Next time you hear from us, we'll know where Tennessee is going to go for a bowl game. We'll have plenty of coverage for you that Sunday, and then obviously the following days and weeks up until Tennessee's bowl game of, Tennessee's opponent, kind of Tennessee's history in the bowl game, Tennessee's history against the opponent, just different stuff. And of course, we'll also be able to have some practice coverage again too, which that's the first time in 3 years we've been able to have bowl game practice coverage, and that'll be, I don't remember all the stuff for it. I don't remember how, but obviously it's different. Butch Jones and Jeremy Pruitt, what all we get to see in practices, but I wonder if it'll be the exact same as we get to see in season, or be more like fall camp and stuff. But it'd be nice to actually be able to go cover practices for bowl games, or bowl practices, and see how this team is doing in December. So that'll be nice. But we'll have all that stuff for you on RockyTopInsider.com. You can find all of our stuff there. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, or Rocky Top Insider on all of that. We appreciate all of you who interact with the podcast on YouTube and listen to it regularly as well, whether it's through Apple Podcast or on your Android phone. Whatever it is, we appreciate you all and everything you've done for us this year and in years past, interacting with our work, reading our stuff, listening to our stuff, watching our videos. All of you are fantastic. Signing off for Ben McKee, I am Nathaniel Rutherford, and this has been another episode of the RTI Podcast.